There we go. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining on what is a lovely, lovely evening. So this Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025, meeting of the Budget Committee is now called to order. Ms. Henderson, will you please call the roll?
Buck.
Here.
Afghan. Here. Mamboop.
Here.
Horrigan. Here. Rapp.
Here.
Verdick.
Here.
Wendland.
Here.
Zeller.
Here.
Rebello.
Here.
Salehi.
Here.
Che. Rye. Love. Here. Allander.
Here.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining. Next is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting on March 20th, 2025. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Mr. Rebello. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilor Wendland. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes approving the minutes from March 20th. Next on the agenda is public comment. And if you're here for public comment and you haven't filled out a form, can you raise your hand? Okay, so I think I have all the public comments. I will call you forward to the presentation table. Please speak into the microphone and state your first and last name, and you'll have 3 minutes to share your thoughts. The time is tracked on the lights at the desk. Green to go, yellow when time is coming to an end, and red is the end of the 3 minutes. So first up is Kim Walmouth. Welcome.
Hey, hello. My name is Kim Walmouth, and I live on Lakewood Bay. Thank you for hearing me. I came to speak before the Budget Committee to advocate for funding to properly manage lake access, water safety, and enforcement of city park rules on Oswego Lake. After the recent public access ruling, park rules were established, but they are not being enforced. We have already had a couple of close calls of swimmers in distress who were rescued by Good Samaritan homeowners. These swimmers are good people, not troublemakers, who were unprepared without life jackets. In addition, despite city park rules prohibiting motorized watercraft from entering the lake at Millennium Park, this is occurring on a daily basis. It is simply not safe to have motorized boats between the buoy lines and shorelines, and it is a big deviation from the Lake Corps rules, which prohibit this activity because it is an area reserved for swimmers, paddle boarders, and kayakers. I recognize that it will take time to educate the public on the new rules, but this is best done through full-time staffing at the boater swimmer entry point at Millennium Park. Signage is not enough. I have heard there may be a tentative proposal for part-time staffing at Millennium Park. This would be substandard and a missed opportunity to make sure the public has life jackets and swim buoys, to educate them about lake protocols, and to ensure that only non-motorized watercraft are entering. I request you thoughtfully consider incorporating these 2 items into, at a minimum, into your budget proposal. 1, funding for 2 full-time positions to staff the access point at Millennium Park. This would provide 84 hours of coverage, which aligns with park hours of dawn to dusk, 7 days per week. They would manage access, provide public education about park rules, and potentially be a point person in case of another emergency. 2, funding to develop a first responder water rescue plan. Unlike other city parks where police and fire department can drive to the scene to administer first aid in the event of an accident, I don't believe the city has any plan in place to address emergencies or infractions on the water. The cost of these proposals would be partially offset by a reduction of emergent and non-emergent dispatch services and the required subsequent police response due to rule violations, safety concerns, and emergencies. Finally, I wonder if the city has talked to their liability carrier about staffing and safety protocols they recommend putting into place to mitigate risk. Remember, the city now controls the only public access to the lake, so it must accept responsibility for reducing the risks of those that cross that point. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Lynn Sosa.
Hello, thank you. My name's Lynn Sosa, and I'm here to speak on behalf of a project that is on the proposed budget under capital improvements, line 4. It's the Blue Heron Road Rehabilitation Project. 14 years ago, my husband sent me to look at a house for sale on this road, and I drove up that street, and after having lived in Lake Oswego for 20 years prior, seeing all the beautiful neighborhoods, I drove up this road, went right past the house, did a U-turn, got on the phone, called them, and I said, there is no way we're living on that road. It's just not going to happen. Fast forward, we see another house on that street a few months later, fall in love with it, and there we are. We're living on Blue Heron Road. Since we moved in, I spent a lot of time thinking about how I could get involved, trying to call the city. I talked to the city engineer at that point, Joel Comerick? I can't remember. He's retired now. Very nice man, and I said, there's something's got to be done about this road. And he said, he looked at this exact proposed schedule, and he said, good news. Your street's on the schedule for this summer. I'm like, it is? It's on the street? It's on the schedule? And he said, yeah, it's on the schedule. So I told all the neighbors the road was going to be taken care of, and of course, the time came and went, and nothing happened. And then I called again. Joel had retired. I've been in contact with Stefan, and he's been super helpful, super informative, and he said, good news, your road's on the schedule. Don't worry about it. It's going to be done in 2020. And it came and went, and 2022 came and went. And I find that we're just a project hopeful is all it means when it's on this schedule, and that by the end of these 3 meetings about the budget is when things really solidify. And about 18 months ago, a lot of my neighbors came out here and advocated for our street to be repaired. And I was not at that meeting, but I was on the live stream. And the takeaway I got from that was, if you don't show up here in the spring of 2025 and fight for your street, no one's going to pay any attention to you. It's just going to get flicked and kicked to the curb like it always has. And I mean, this street has literally not been paved in over 60 years. It's been on these schedules for decades. And so I'm here to stress the urgency, my importance, to have this stay on and get locked down and finally get taken care of once and for all. So I thank you for your time, and that's all I have.
Thank you so much. My apologies. Is there anyone else here for a public comment? Okay. Oh, there is, did it?
Yeah. There's one.
Oh, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing us. My name is Roger Smith. I live at the last house on Blue Heron Road, and I've lived there for 67 years. For 67 years, I've anticipated that that road would be resurfaced to some reasonable passage. Nothing has ever happened. I've been down here so many times as I was a yo-yo. And all I get, and all the rest of us get, are a promise it's on the docket, the money's being appropriated, the engineering's being done. We've heard every story that's possible to give out. And you people never tell us the truth. It's quite upsetting. We pay taxes just like the people on the other streets in this town, and you ignore us. And we don't think that's fair, and we think that you should do something. And I'd like to ask that the council would consider repairing the road to where it is reasonable. You made a stab at it 2 years ago. You didn't fix the approach coming up the hill. The entry is still full of great big chuck holes. I live the last house in the streets, so I get to experience every chuck hole there is. And I promise you there's a lot of them. You could do something to help us in that manner until you can figure out when you could possibly do this. I probably won't see it in my lifetime because I'm 90 years old. And I've been coming here for a lot of different times. When I first started, You said, well, we don't fix it because it belongs to the county, but we live in the city. Well, we don't own the road. We heard that for 15 years. So we've heard every excuse that is possible. I'd like you to consider fixing the road to some reasonable passage. It literally tears our cars to pieces. No matter how slow you go, and it's a mess. If $10,000 worth of repair on the road would make it much more livable for us. And we'd like to at least have you consider starting at that point and then consider getting the rest of it done at your leisure. That would be my guess. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir, so much for coming down. Yes, please come forward. If you can state your first and last name for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Susan Wellins, and I was born and raised just a road away from Blue Heron, and I live on Blue Heron for almost 40 years. And everything that's been said here is true. One of the things that I remember when we met maybe a year ago when there was discussion of doing something about the road and the ongoing conversation, someone said, I think it was maybe the manager said, well, you know, it's a dead-end road. One of my concerns is it's really not. It is, but because there is a walking path, that road is very busy. There's a lot of people that walk that road to try and do a loop, which they have to go over that really scary bridge and hit Keelock or Cedar or any of those roads because, of course, the access to the walkway, you have to cross South Shore. So a lot of people go down Blue Heron. They're able to cut through that dead end generously because Roger Smith has made that accessible. And so it's an unbelievable amount of people that walk that. It's not just that road. It's the whole Blue Heron community, Cardinal, Westridge, they all walk it. I know the people that walk by my house every day. I'm the third house up from that entrance, and that entrance is dangerous. My son had someone hit him in the front just because there's barely enough. It's hard visibly, and it's also very difficult to navigate when it's dark or it's raining. Or the other thing is there's kids on the street, and the kids walk to school, and it's a fairly active road because there are a lot of people walking. They walk their dogs, they're out, they're active, and safety is an issue because it's not well lit either. The other thing is, way back when we had our flood in '96, the water quality was a real issue, and it was I was on the water quality committee, and one of the problems was the city was allowing there was no filtration for the drainage. And there is a lot of water that goes down the one side with the embankment when it's heavy rains. And there is siltation that builds up in that bay, like annually, and it has had to be dredged. And that is silt that you guys tried with the sewer project to help, but now we have more silt that was left in there. But that road has been eroding all the way down, and in front of my house, maple trees only last so long, especially when they root. And Lynn, who spoke, has had to take out 11 trees because they have fallen, and they're the old maples. Those old maples are straight across from me on a bank that is like this, and the roots are right here.
Thank you.
All
Thank
along.
you. Thank you so much for your comment.
Safety is a big thing.
Yes.
And I know you have plans. I just want to make sure that you do what you say you're going to do and keep it funded.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you for your commentary. And is there anyone else here for public comment? And then hopefully the entire budget committee has gotten, we've had some public comment come in through email, and I believe everyone's gotten those from staff. All right. With that, thank you so much. We'll turn it over to City Manager Bennett and Finance Director Cross.
Thank you, Chair Zeller. And I do think that there is some kind of unwritten rule in nature that budget committee meetings only happen on really glorious nights. And so if you heard lawnmowers or the crack of the bat, that's just means it's budget season. So I'm going to deliver a very high-level overview of the budget message and highlight a couple of the issues that I think you may care about as a committee. Let me say at the outset that the discussion of the capital improvement plan comes at your next meeting, so I'm not going to touch on any of the capital projects. So you'll recall your next meeting is May 8th. Okay. So I wrote this in the budget message, but I have sort of 6 major takeaways that I want to make sure that you all focus on. The first one is just what I said the last time you met, which is because the city, especially the general fund, but also our utility funds are dependent largely on very stable revenue sources. There's very little change either on the revenue side or on the expenditure side in this proposed budget. It's an incredibly stable budget that largely carries forward all of the programs and activities that the city is currently engaged in. The second thing is, I think I mentioned to you last year, we use city council goals as the method of making decisions. So when we do have to make choices between various projects, or if we have to figure out how much funding should be allocated to a department, we take a look at their ability to execute on the 8 council strategic goals and the 18 city council initiatives. Another big change, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, is last budget, we undercounted the number of, essentially what the full-time equivalent is for the number of on-call folks that are needed to operate the Lake Oswego Recreation and Aquatic Center. And so this budget corrects that. It doesn't, however, require any more money because we just miscounted the number of hours divided by the number of people. Quite a lot, though, of difference between what you saw in the prior budget and what you saw here, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. The fourth thing is we made a number of personnel shifts to better match where people are housed in the city, and I'll talk about this in a little more detail, and where either we have a council goal or we have a change in workload. Unlike most previous years, this proposed budget does not include a contribution to the capital reserve. In the past, if we've had excess funds or funds that were not needed for routine operations or allocated to specific capital projects, we've been able to put money away into the capital reserve. We have made a small contribution to the capital reserve in this budget, but it's for a very specific, already identified piece of equipment. So in other words, as capital priorities come up, as new people come and talk about their needs, we don't have any funding set aside to be able to address those new capital projects in the upcoming biennium. And then last but not least, we were able to make the historic transfer of $3 million a year for each of the 2 years of the biennium from the general fund to the street fund. So you recall that last year we needed to close the gap on several capital projects for the Parks Department, including the LORAC and the skate park. And so we reduced the transfer that the general fund made to the street fund, but this budget has restored that dollar amount. Any additional general fund spending, however, that you want to do, this is your revenue source. So in other words, if you want to increase anything that's happening in the general fund, the place that we have to take it from is to reduce the transfer that the general fund is able to make to the street fund. So you'll be weighing street capital projects against general fund operational needs. I'm not telling you that's good or bad, I'm just telling you that's the money that's available for any change in general fund spending. You'll recall from the last time that we met, we started the budget process by allocating funds to the general fund departments. We treat every general fund department sort of like an enterprise fund, not exactly, but sort of like an enterprise fund. And so we allocate the funding to them first, and then we ask them to balance their budgets. In other jurisdictions, in a lot of cases, What happens is departments propose their budgets to the budget officer, and then the budget officer balances. We kind of do it the opposite way here. In the current budget, the standard allocation of general fund revenues was an increase of 4.5% in the first year of the biennium and 3.5% in the second year of the biennium, with 2 exceptions, and those are the ones here. So for a variety of reasons, mostly related to the fact that we are seeing more seasoned officers in the police department retire, being replaced by folks who have career growth and salary growth in their future. The police department was not able to balance with that 4.5% allocation, but we didn't identify any areas in police services that we wanted to reduce. And so the first fiscal year allocation for the police department is 7.13%, which is about $500,000 in the first year. And then in the second year, they go back to the 3.5 allocation that everybody else got. Plus a one-time additional allocation for a capital project. We need to replace our body cameras. There's a lot of reasons why. They're not that old. They just don't work the way we want them to work, and they don't work the way we think the people of Lake Oswego want them to work. And so I've given them a one-time allocation of general fund resources above that level to allow them to actually replace that piece of equipment. The other place where I made an exception is with the planning section of the Community Development Department. Community Development Department has 2 sources. One is general fund sources. The other is the building fund, which is a separate fund. For many years, the planning department wasn't spending down their funds during the year. And so we kept their allocation, actually, many biennium at 0. Well, this year, they've had, actually last year, they had a number of council goals. They're actually starting to spend down their fund balance. And then to accomplish the additional council goals that they have, we need to increase their allocation. It's a big percentage, but it's not, because they're a smaller department, it's not a huge dollar amount. So it's 19.34% in the first year, or $400,000. And again, in the second year, they go back to the 3.5% everybody else got. Okay.
Did you want questions now, or?
You know, I am
end?
more of a, as long as we don't get too hung up, because I want to make sure you guys, I have all the department heads behind me. I want to make sure you have time, but you can take questions now if you will. I of course, would rather do the questions now, but I don't want to get hung up.
So if we have some quick questions, I just had a quick one on the police department. I understand what you're saying. Hey, you had a bunch of older police officers
Who were at the top of the salary schedule and also maybe have had lower health insurance costs because they were at that phase of their life. And they've been replaced by folks who are getting
But
large.
aren't they much lower on the salary schedule? So doesn't that offset some
When
of
they
it?
come in, they're lower, but then their year-over-year increases is substantially higher. And oftentimes their benefit costs are higher because oftentimes they need full family health insurance as opposed to.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Aaron, or Councilor Rapp.
I'm not used to not having my button, Mayor. City Manager, can you help me find where you've allocated budget for additional police resources to manage Millennium Plaza with lake access?
So the budget was assembled before any of the decisions were made. So there are no additional numbers in the budget for anything related to either Millennium Plaza Park or the lake.
So how are we accounting for that?
Again, it's not in the budget.
Do we have
But there
money
is
for it?
currently no staffing
Do we-
for.
The park,
so-
he asked a question specific to the police department.
Gotcha.
Let me answer the question more fully. We have anticipated that we'll need additional parks and recreation staffing at the steps. And that is anticipated in, and you can ask this question in more detail of Ivan. We have sufficient budget to hire seasonal staff to staff Millennium Plaza Park. We have not increased police department staffing.
So, yeah, police, I was just assuming it was police. So staff to manage the access or the
Yeah,
police.
so our park rangers enforce many of our park rules.
Okay, and.
Again, this is enforcement at our park.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm not getting it twisted. Do we have a forecast for how much it would cost to have staffing full-time, not seasonal? Do we know how much that would cost?
Let us get back to you on that question at the next meeting.
Great.
And by full, I mean, the person who spoke earlier was suggesting that we have full-time, 7-day-a-week staffing.
Yep,
Is that what you're suggesting? Okay, thank you.
at least for a year.
Happy to answer that question at the next meeting.
It would be ideal, I think, for all of us if we got that number ahead of the meeting.
Yeah, sure.
Someone-
We will send out the answers to the questions as we have them.
Thank you.
So, yes. Let me go back here, though, just one more time, just so we're all clear. I'm going to go back to bullet number 6 here, which is the proposed budget includes the transfer for each of the 2 years from the general fund to the street fund. That is the available discretionary ongoing operating revenue available for allocation to other priorities. Which is not to say that the street project won't get funded. It will be some future street project. Okay.
So I guess I disagree with you that it's the only source of funds. I mean,
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. If you want to reduce program in other places, you can.
yeah, I mean, it's an allocation issue, it's a priority issue, it's how we want to use our resources. So we're running a fairly large budget, and if we need to slice and dice somewhere else, that may be the wish of the budget committee, but
Yeah.
I think you can't say that that's the only funding source.
I agree with you, Councilor Wendland, so please forgive me for overstating. It's the only thing that doesn't require reduction someplace else.
Right. Do you know what the contribution to the capital reserve has been in the past,
You know off the top of your
last
head.
3 years? Dollar amount?
Not off the top of my head, but I can look real quick.
We'll look it up for you. I believe last budget, we didn't make it as well because all of the excess funds went to either the skate park or the LORAC.
Right. I guess I just have some concerns about where we're not being able to make that contribution every year, because now it sounds like we're at the optimum spending, so we don't really have much in reserves.
Oh, we have a lot of funds in reserves. What we don't have is unallocated reserves for capital that might come up. So it's those opportunity projects that come along. Say you could get a grant funding to finish phase 3 of the Rasik Park. We wouldn't have the matching funds already in the capital reserve. I mean, that's just an example.
Right,
Whereas in the past, we've been able to do that.
right. But the source of the capital reserve fund has usually been out of the operating fund, is that correct?
It's usually been unspent general fund, unallocated general fund resources.
Yeah, it's
Right, which
basically
is-
been just the leftover from the previous item, the one-time funds. In '22, it was $810,000. In '23, it was $990,000. These are funds that were set aside for parks, I mean, primarily. And then with LORAC, all those funds were spent.
Right? Okay. No, I'm just saying that $1 million is still $1 million, that we typically have something that comes up in a year unforeseen. So, okay, thank you.
All right, so the other place where the Budget Committee often wants to focus is what are the proposed changes to personnel in the proposed budget? And so I've tried to highlight the major changes. The first big change, and this is probably of the things on this list, the place where we made a deliberate funding decision based on council goals. And if this is a completely new position, unfilled, we added the urban forester position. It is housed in the Parks Department, but it would be funded 50% from the Parks Department, which is in the general fund, and 50% from streets. About 60% of the city's trees are in parks, and about 40% of them are in the rights of way. We added a limited duration senior living paramedic, which is partly funded by a grant from the state of Oregon. It's a 2-year position. Well, this one has a very specific assignment also tied to council goals about helping the most vulnerable residents of Lake Oswego become better prepared for emergencies. We added a behavioral health case manager position that would work with our behavioral health specialist. This is funded for the first 3 years by a grant from Clackamas County as part of Metro's supportive housing services tax. I would assume that given the workload on behavioral health, that we should anticipate that we will want to put this in the general fund at the expiration of the county grant. We have received word from the county that they don't believe that they will be able to renew the grants that they're making. So although this is funded for the next 3 years, I would just anticipate in the next budget, it's something we want. Doesn't mean we will, but we'd want to add to the city's budget. We add a position that's split between HR and finance. They currently share one FTE. Half of that person sort of does general support for HR. The other half of that person, and she really is a whole person, so I shouldn't put it that way, she supports payroll. In both payroll and HR, there's been a substantial increase in workload. The LORA Act itself, Megan was sharing, and she's behind me, that in a normal, before the current world environment, we would have done maybe on average 20 recruitments a year. Last year, we did over 40 recruitments for full-time FTE, and we've recruited over 150 folks who are on-call employees for the aquatic center. And so the amount of work being done in HR is substantially increased, not just on the recruitment side, but then imagine that also has to translate into the benefits side, where we have all those folks who are either retiring or going someplace else and then onboarding. And so you have a lot of additional work in HR. We have also added a training program in human resources, so the workload has gone up substantially. The same thing's happened in payroll, largely because of the effect of paid leave Oregon. And I wish I could tell you it was something more glamorous than that. But the complexity of every single paid leave Oregon case is substantial for payroll. And I wish it was as simple that when we all pressed approved on our timesheets that it just went into payroll and magically they could pay us. But every single paycheck that the city issues has to be individually verified. So it's not a straightforward thing. So, however, what we've done with this position is offset that position because we've had a vacant FTE in the city manager's office that used to do public affairs. And we think we can absorb the work of that person in CMO on the long run. And so this represents a 0.25 increase in FTE. In the budget, we have added utility-funded positions in our public works crews, one in the street crew and one in the stormwater crew. I think those of you who have been through the past 5 years know that we've had a substantial increase in the amount of work we're doing in stormwater, and that these crews that have been combined really need to be separated, and they need to have discrete bodies of work that happen for both our stormwater system and also for our streets. Utility-funded but new positions. The budget absorbs, this is not a new FTE, but we absorbed the funding, or we have allocated additional funding to the police department because the school district cut their funding for the second school resource officer. In the past, we paid for one, they paid for one. As part of their budget reductions during the current fiscal year, they've cut their funding for the SRO. And we have to absorb the funding to keep that officer, whether or not we assign them to the schools. But I think that the idea here was that we would continue to assign that officer to the schools. We added a 0.4 FTE city prosecutor. This was work that was previously contracted out. There's one additional administrative support position in parks, and there is one additional natural resources and stewardship coordinator position also in parks. So that's a total of 8 FTE.
Just a quick question on the prosecutor. I thought I read that it was an on-call. It went from contract to on-call. Is it actually a 0.4 full-time? I mean,
Yeah, so what the city considers anything less than half-time an on-call position or a temporary position, but on-call could be anywhere from 1 hour a year up to 19 hours a week. Okay. So it's just this
so is it a
benefited.
wash financially, or is it an increase?
It's roughly a wash. We were actually able to reduce the allocation to the city attorney's office this biennium. Yes, so from a budgetary perspective, it's not an increased cost. And I think that both the city attorney's office and the police department would tell you that this is actually working better than with the contracted out position.
Counselor Afghan?
Thank you, Chair Zeller. Ms. Bennett, on the added 1 street crew and 2 stormwater crew positions, was the outsourcing considered? I don't need a long answer. Was the outsourcing considered to outsource that as opposed to hiring headcounts?
No, and the real reality is that we need long-term plans for crews and an ongoing sort of operational control of the work that they're doing. So no, we didn't contemplate contracting that work out.
Thank you.
We also need them available in the event of emergencies.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, and then I mentioned this before. In the last budget, we calculated essentially the number of on-call positions, and it's hundreds at the LORAC as the equivalent of 14 FTE. But when we went through and recalculated as part of this budget process based on their operating plan, the same number of hours calculated to 31 FTE. So you'll see an increase of 17 FTE in the budget. And I don't want to tell you it's not an increase because that would not sound right. But the reality is it doesn't require an increase in the budget. So it's just, I believe, on our part, a calculation error. All right, here's what the budget looks like. The total proposed budget is $462 million for the biennium. But you'll see that about $245 million of that is the actual operations of the city. So about 31% is personnel. I didn't do the math on that number, but you probably can do it really fast. And about 22% is materials and services, the things that we buy, the contracts that we have to actually run the city. A substantial amount of the funds are held in contingency, mostly by policy, or held in reserves to do things like paid debt service, or as required by people who hold our debt. About 11% is capital projects, and about 10% is either debt service or transfers. Here's how this gets divided up. About 45% of the budget goes to the general fund. So those are police, fire, library, parks, planning. It is almost half of the budget. About 13% goes to sewer. A lot of that is debt. A lot, isn't it? A lot of that is debt because the lowest project is still on our books. About 11% goes to water, 9% to streets, 4% to stormwater. The building department, I can't even read the number, I think it's 3%. And then other is sort of everything else. If you have questions for other, I'm gonna look sideways at Sean. Okay. I'm gonna talk about the general fund because that's usually where the action is. So I think I told you we start the budget process by allocating all of the city's general fund revenues. It's primarily property taxes, but it also includes state shared revenues, which we'll talk about in a second. It also includes transient lodging tax, franchise fees that we get from the utilities. This is currently, in the proposed budget, this is how we've allocated those general revenues. The majority goes to the things that you see in the community every day, about 34% to police, about 27% to fire, Parks and Rec is 22%, and then all of the other departments are quite a bit smaller. Questions about this before I go to the next slide? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Rapp.
I love transient lodging tax. I
Yeah,
love it. Let's talk about that for a minute.
sure.
Remind me the hotels that are in Lake Oswego. It's the old Howard Johnson, right? Is that even still in
Yeah,
business?
so there's 4 off Bangy and then the one,
There's 4 on
On the
Bangy.
Lake Shore, that's it, right?
that's
Yeah.
it. So
Now,
Hilton, Marriott,
that's right.
Crown
There's a-
Plaza. I think
The
there's another
Fairfield?
Marriott. Yeah, Fairfield.
Okay,
And
so
There's
then-
2 Marriott
Second
properties.
question I have is, I can't remember where we landed last year on short-term rentals. Are we doing short-term rentals in Lake Oswego?
Oh,
Airbnbs?
yes, and they
What do we
do.
decide on?
They pay lodging. Yes, you can remember that you can have a short-term rental in Lake Oswego under sort of two conditions. You either you can rent your house, if you go on vacation,
Yeah.
you can rent your house while you're on vacation. Or if you have an accessory unit in your home,
Okay.
in your primary home, it has to be your primary dwelling. So we
Right.
don't allow anyone to build any, other than an ADU.
And we're collecting transient lodging on those, right?
Yes. We get it straight from Airbnb and
Right, they
VRBO.
just pay us a check at the end of it, okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. This tells you one part of the picture, but the other thing that it doesn't tell you is essentially the size of all the departments in the general fund, because all that tells you is the city's general revenues. Many of the city's departments, now I'm going to put my glasses on because I actually can't read those numbers. Many of the city's departments have their own revenues. So for example, the police department has contracts with the city of Milwaukee and the city of West Lynn to offer dispatch services for their police departments. The fire department has contracts with other fire districts that pay the city. The parks department generates a huge amount of recreation-related revenue. And so although a larger share of general fund resources might go to, say, police or fire, the parks department actually is the second largest general fund department because the amount of revenue that they generate. The library is the same thing. So the city's general fund allocation makes up the difference between what it costs to operate the library and the amount of money we get from the county library tax. But so when you look at the library overall, you'll see that they're a much larger slice of the pie than they would be if we just looked at the money that we allocate to them. Does this make sense? It also means that some of us, the departments that are 100% dependent on the general fund allocation, we look smaller, which makes me happy, so. I have to turn to that page, sorry. I wish I could tell you that I had a. I show their, yeah. I would guess that's the grant revenue that we're getting from Clackamas County to pay for the behavioral health specialist. I don't have the detail with me. Sean has the big book.
Yeah,
No, the number is
number's
right. I'm confident about the number, but I don't have the level of detail in my budget document to answer the question. Go ahead.
Remind me, are we doing the deep dives by department today or?
Well, normally we don't do a deep dive by department. We let you ask them any questions that you might have.
But they'll be coming up?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
If you invite them. And I think you will.
Yes.
Okay. I think, are you going to answer? Do you have the answer? I'm guessing it's the grant revenue.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you, the exact.
Prime.
It's a lot of smaller ones, so I have to, it's not just the grant revenue, it's all kinds of revenue, so I'll have to get back to you.
Okay. This is,
Speeding tickets? Now that we have two
well, it
officers.
could be that our inside prosecutor is doing a better job prosecuting speeding tickets. Kidding, but court gets to keep that revenue, right? No, PD gets to get that revenue. All right. I'm going to turn this over to Sean for a second to do the state share revenues because there's a piece of what we need to do tonight is about making sure that we can get the revenue that's collected at the state level that's allocated to local governments. You actually have to do a couple of specific things. Are you ready?
Yes, so like we do every cycle, we've talked about state shared revenues a bit. So these are we have two kinds of state shared revenues. We have these that we get if we provide 4 of those services near the, at the bottom, police protection, fire, street, sanitary. So we actually provide all of those services, so we more than get that money. So this is just me showing you, this is what we budgeted for 24-25, this and then what we're estimating, and then kind of what we ended up budgeting for the next year, kind of based on the last 5-year trend. And then also kind of what the League of Oregon Cities, they send out an estimate guide, and I don't use their estimate per se, like this is the amount per, for our population, I kind of look at the difference that they do, and then I kind of look at, okay, between their estimates, and then I take our actuals, and then I use that kind of ratio difference. So this is just the first part, me saying, okay, we're going to get all of these. The other part that we have to do, though, is you can see the last one on here is that 20% liquor tax. Budgeted 780, and we're doing 700 in the next 2 years, so that's 1.4 million. There's another one that came out that's for the 14% liquor tax that we also get, but this you have to kind of elect that you want to do it. We've already, to receive these additional funds, and by doing this, we're also required to have a public hearing for the public to come up and talk about how these funds could be spent. We assume that you were already going to want to take this money, so we've already built it into the budget that's there. So if you want to use it for something else, we'll have to adjust the budget.
Any questions for Sean before I open the public hearing? Yes, Councilor Afghan.
Director, with all the news we keep hearing from Washington, D.C., is there going to be any impact to us on our revenue from the state?
Not so much on the state, because as you can see, on the first one, I guess the biggest one, I mean, we don't really get cigarette taxes. It's about $2,000 a month, if that. The bigger one would be the motor vehicle tax is the one that we get the most from, and it's really from vehicle registration, title, gas taxes. So that's all internal. There's nothing from the state on that, or from the federal government on that one. And then the other one is the liquor tax on, it's also state, and it's all based on state income, so there's nothing from the federal on that one either. So this is really just state taxes that they give.
Okay.
They keep at the state level for some, they take some to the county, and then they give some to the cities. And so just our portion of the city.
So if tequila gets more expensive, we get more taxes?
Yeah, we really cleaned up during the pandemic when people
Okay,
were buying
thank
a
you.
lot more. No.
No.
And just so for a little history, because I like a little history lesson, the reason that this is distributed to the cities and counties in Oregon is that years ago, the state preempted local governments from collecting cigarette and liquor taxes. And in exchange, they said, we'll share it with you because we know, particularly with liquor taxes, we know you have a number of law enforcement related costs that comes from people's consumption of alcohol. So we can't have our own liquor tax, but we can count on the state to distribute some of us to us.
Did the liquor tax increase?
The actual taxes, no. What you're kind of seeing, what we're seeing is the amount that our share went up during COVID quite a bit, and then it's come down this last year. But again, using the League of Oregon Cities estimates, because this is kind of what they're assuming that's going to be a little bit better than what we are going to collect this year.
Okay, so that's delayed by a year? Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, it's just we had budgeted based on, we'll use like the last 5 years and kind of go, okay, what are we averaging? Is it going to continue up? So we budgeted that we're going to get $675,000 this year in this tax. Because I'll look at where it's come in for the last 4 or 5 years as a percentage and look at what we've received so far this year and use that same percentage to kind of estimate what we're going to get at the end of the year. And it's actually down quite a bit. But
Yeah,
it does look
alcohol
like
sales are going down. So
yeah, but we are expecting it to go back up, or at least, the estimates we're using from the League of Oregon Cities is expecting it to go up.
Okay, I'd just be careful with that number because
Yeah.
the industry as a whole is hemorrhaging.
Yeah,
So-
no, it's a pretty conservative, we had 675 and now we're estimating 550, so it's. Yes.
Yeah, that's why we put our hands on the wheel with these numbers and don't just take somebody else's numbers and do math, or do simple math.
If there's no other questions, I'm going to open the public hearing. Is anyone here who wants to testify about the 14% alcohol tax uses? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Any other questions? And then I think we need a vote and to accept this additional funding. So it just,
Move to accept the additional funding for the 14% OLCC.
thank you, Councilor Wendland. A second? Second, was that Counselor Raff? Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Director Kraus.
Okay, I think now we're ready for your questions about the various, oh, this is not till later.
So we are not going into recess, and I think there will be questions for every department, so if we can just have the directors come up.
So I'd suggest that you do it in the order that it's in
Yes.
the budget
Yes.
binder. And I will also say, for the police department, Chief Burke had to be away at a conference, and so we have Captain Simon, so just be nice to him, okay?
We will.
Just as good.
Not his budget, though.
Oh, please.
Come on, Clayton. Stay up. Are you on?
So,
Good evening, everyone.
thank you, and thank you for joining.
No, thank you.
A great opportunity, right?
Sure.
So I had a question. I'll kick us off, and certainly others as there are questions. It's talking about the increase in materials and services to a heightened level, and I wasn't really, if you could explain a little bit more what's driving and what we're seeing within the city that's driving the need with a behavioral health specialist that we got the grant. So if you could put some context to that.
I guess I'll first talk about with the behavioral health specialist. Fortunately, we were able to present council just a couple weeks ago, talking about the sheer workload that Amber Hambrick, who's our behavioral health specialist, has. And calls for service both with police and without police continue to increase. And what we're just finding, in addition to the workload here, in which we also share her with West Lynn, for which they pay us, which is part of the, I believe the revenue items that both the city manager and Director Cross talked about, that she's needing that assistance. There's so much that she has to do aside from charting her notes and making sure that she's keeping the required material she needs in order for her certification, but also to respond appropriately, and the different things that we're doing there, whether it comes to training, whether it comes to looking for different database systems to help manage that outside of a police system, because there has to be a separation there. So I was real thankful that the city went for the grant, as is I know Chief Burke and the rest of our team, in order to get her some help. So that's for that piece there. Overall, I'm going to refer to some notes if that's okay with everyone, because I don't want to speak out of turn. But overall thought, nearly every area of our operations has seen cost increases, and we're big into tech and gadgets. You can see just by the way I'm dressed, we got lots of different stuff that tends to wear out and has to be replaced and has different service fees. So we've seen costs coming in higher than anticipated. When you start looking at, on the big technology front, you're talking about like radio service fees, records management service fees, a lot of the different computer programs that we use that will go towards sustainability that we'll talk about a little later, I'm sure. Rising wages and benefits, which have already been brought up, but we're seeing increased costs in vehicle purchases, the outfitting for each of those, the maintenance for each of those. Like I said, our records management system, our current computer-aided dispatch or CAD system actually has quite a bit of work to do. We're still working to try and get certain upgrades on there. If that vendor is unable to do that, we might even have to go to a new CAD system as part of a bigger consortium. So that's the exact sentiment that we all have as well. So we're hoping that they get to those things that we need to do. The radio systems that we use that tie into our C800 radio group, the fees for those continue to raise. And even in this particular budget, we overestimated what they were, and they came in even higher than that. So, we're seeing a lot of those things. Everything we're doing now is digital. There's video, there's audio, and so we need to store those. We need to have systems that work with all those. And as you guys know, even if you got a Comcast account, you know exactly what we're talking about. All this stuff just continues to increase. And then ongoing hardware costs for replacements, working with our IT department's been great, but new servers, because everything that we do, each car has an officer with a body camera and a camera facing forward and a camera facing to the side and a camera facing to the back. And that's all footage that we have to store on any contact. And I think we had somewhere around almost 27,000 incidents last year.
So continuous replacement of the uniform, so that way we can look as dapper as I look right now, and then all the different duty gear and protective gear. And just every one of those things continues to increase as we've seen across the board, consumer spending wise.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Are there other questions for Captain? Counselor Afghan?
Thank you, Chair. I have one comment and 3 questions. The comment is, Captain Simon, we love our police department. Now comes the 3 questions. I noticed that we have about $255,000 per year for vehicle replacement, and I see that it's consistent every year. How often do we replace a vehicle in the police department?
Well, that's a great question, and it really kind of depends. Sometimes it depends on how many people we have working, so our staffing numbers and how many vehicles we have out on the road, which can obviously accelerate the usage and then the replacement rates. We try and get as many miles out of those cars as we can, but we tend to replace a handful of cars every biennium, which is why we kind of set it that way. It's also the reason why we keep our contingency where it is. So as outfitting costs maybe are a little bit more than what we anticipate, we can reach into that area in order to make sure that we can make that happen. As far as how many, it looks to be, I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but it seems to be on average over the 2 years, anywhere between like 5 and 7 cars seems to be the normal attrition rate for vehicles.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question is, I see 75 FTE. I ask this question every other year. Is 75 enough to be proactive with everything that we see?
I really appreciate that question, and I do appreciate your support with your very first comment. I feel like that we have a lot of the resources that we need. The city is incredibly supportive. I really appreciate the folks on council and city manager's office and allowing us to do the things that we need to do, whether it's being creative and looking for grant-funded positions like our behavioral health specialist and the case manager there. So right now, I mean, I think that we have what it is that we need, and certainly as situations change and dictate, it's nice to know that if we run into a situation like that, we can come before you and say, hey, this is maybe the issue that we're running into now. So,
thank you. Last question. 2 years ago, when I asked Chief, how are we combating climate change within the police department, and are we going to have electric vehicles, I got a list of 50 reasons why we can't go that direction. I'm going to ask that question at every budget review and hoping that there is a crack in that philosophy. Fortunately for you, and Chief didn't show up today for good reasons, so I cannot ask you that question, but I really, really want us to start thinking about combating climate change since this is our council goals, and we all have to support it. So you get a pass on this one, Captain, but I'll run into the chief and ask him that question.
all right, I'll cross off the 50 responses that I had for you then. So.
Okay. Thank you.
60? Did you say it was 60?
You got 50, I got 10 more.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Councilor Mahbub.
Yes, yeah, thank you. You know, like Ali said, great police. You came here, but the $300,000 for the body cameras, did we get the body cameras a couple of years ago?
We did.
What are we changing? Like, what's
So, it's
Yeah, if it's
the
secret.
more PC version is it's not
Yeah.
quite living up to the expectations in which what we were sold. So
Yeah.
it's obviously, it's a product that's been around for a while. I mean, body cams have been around for a little while, but they have grown tremendously in what it is that they're capable of doing. What we're finding is everything that we thought that ours were going to be able to do, we're having a ton of issues with. So they're recording fine, but the battery life on them is not very good. The syncing's not very good. There's a number of issues that we're looking at. Plus, we went with an on-premise solution in order to maintain control, whereas most of the things going forward are going to be in the cloud, which come with their own different set of expenses there. And so we really just want to take a fresh look at what might be a better option for us.
Thank you, yeah.
Any other questions from the Budget Committee for Captain Simons? Go ahead if you have a question.
Right now, we are storing our body camera footage and vehicle footage locally. We have, and while we do have different retention periods set to those videos, I think right now our IT department's done a really good job with us in terms of getting us the server space that we need. But the other thing that in the cloud solution provides are some opportunities to more effectively work with other agencies, such as maybe a district attorney's office, where it's easier for us to provide an access code where they can download and reduce staff time to download the videos ourselves and then get those to them. Yeah, so we're working with our IT department. They've been great, and we appreciate that.
Thank you, Captain, and thank you for all you and the entire force do.
Oh, thank you.
Next up is Parks and Rec.
Leave the chair for Ivan. Who's wearing shorts, so we know he works for Parks and Rec.
I know.
And just for the committee who's not as familiar with all the department heads, if you could just state your name too, that would help very much.
Hello, I'm Ivan Anderholm. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director.
So I think it's come up, what's the current plan? I know we were all very interested in what it would cost to have full coverage, but I've heard certainly from members on the committee as well as public comment, the plan for Millennium Plaza.
Well, we're still working on the plan. I think that the reality is the budget was put together long before this issue came around. And so the question is, I think as Ivan and I have talked about it, we would not recommend that you staff Millennium Plaza Park 7 days a week during all the daylight hours. We don't staff any of our parks at that level. Right now, we have 1.5 park rangers for the entire system of parks. So our current thinking, and we are still developing the details. As I said, there is budget for this. We have funds for it. Is a seasonal employee who would work full-time, who would cover not only the steps at Lower Millennium, but would also cover the dolphins at Foothills Park, where we have arguably a more significant safety hazard. Let me say it a different way. I understand the change that's happened at the lake, and so I understand, if you live there, what this means for you. But in terms of...
This isn't about people who live there. This is about the whole city. There's trash. It's more than just the people that live there.
Can I finish, please? And then I will let you all talk. The danger of dying from jumping off the dolphins is arguably higher. And then they would also staff George Rogers Park, where we have a significant problem with alcohol use on the beach. So I realize, again, I am not making any statements about the severity of the impact of the change at Lower Millennium. I'm telling you that we have enforcement problems in all of our parks for violations of park rules that are significant public safety hazards. So our current thinking is a single seasonal park ranger who would staff all 3 parks. If the Budget Committee wants to allocate funding and the council wants a higher level enforcement, and let me make that distinction. If the Budget Committee wants to allocate more funding and the council would like a higher level of staffing, then we can have those conversations.
Councilor Wendland, and thank you.
Well, I would rebut and say that we've had George Rogers and the Dolphins since I was a child here, almost. We've had the same safety issues. Why is it coming up this year? And I think we have to have a conversation about safety. I think that's a deflection. I think the real issue is that if you've got a safety problem, we've had it for years, and we should have addressed it on those other areas. So again, it's a value judgment of what are we going to provide resources for. And if we thought it was so bad before, we should have had personnel dealing with this before. As far as the lake access issue, I'm hoping that it's a one-time time period where we can do saturated enforcement on the lake and not split somebody around. And if we can get people trained over the next 120 days, I think it's going to go a lot towards community goodwill. It's going to do a lot to help educate users. But right now, there's a huge education opportunity, and I think you're going to have to figure out a way how to saturate dollars. I'm hoping for at least through the first summer, maybe the second summer, until we get things under control, because we're just going to continue to have people have if there's no enforcement or limited enforcement, we're going to have a situation where people are going to continue, and then they tell their friends, and they tell their friends, and pretty soon they say, well, no one's watching the gate, so let's just do whatever we want to do. So I would be in support of maximizing dollars until we can get the educational and enforcement issues under control. So that would be my suggestion. And I would support you allocating dollars. We've had a problem at George Rogers Park for decades. And people have been jumping off things into the river since I was a kid. So, and that's decades, so.
Councilor Afghan? Or did you want to respond? Okay, Councilor Afghan.
Thank you, Chair. I have one comment and one question for the director. There seems to be a strong desire to do something at the Millennium Park. And what I heard City Manager Bennett say that there are funding in here, but I don't know what we want to do and what's the mechanism to make it happen. I don't know if the Budget Committee is the place to have that conversation, but I'm also in support of doing something that the other councilors are talking about, and people also sending emails and requesting that. But again, City Manager, I heard that she said there is funding here. If I misunderstand that, please correct me. But it's a matter of deciding what we want to do and then pull the trigger. Did I hear that correctly?
So again, what I said was there's funding for summer of 2025 seasonal staffing.
Okay.
What I heard the request for is 2 additional full-time year-round personnel. We do not have that in the budget.
Okay.
Councilor Mahboub?
I had one more question for the director. Director, combating climate change. You, 2 years ago, you told me that by the end of this year, we'll have 100% electric equipment, and past 2025, we're going to have electric trucks. How is it going, and how is your budget supporting those conversations 2 years ago?
So I'm happy to report that we, on a policy level in the department, that all of our handheld maintenance equipment, that's anything that you pick up and use, we have a replacement policy that's 100% electric.
Congratulations,
100%
you're a
electric.
role model.
We are, I will say that we're in the infancy of everybody's favorite big backpack blowers. There's still a technological gap there, so we still are using some of our gas backpack blowers, the very large ones. However, I was just out myself yesterday morning at the LORAC with a crew of parks personnel doing some blowing of all of the hardscapes in preparation with an electric backpack mower, and there were 6 of us with 6. So we are doing that, so that is policy. At this time, we have 1 fully electric Ford Lightning pickup. In this upcoming biennium, we are planning on purchasing 2 additional pickups. And we are keeping our fingers crossed that one of the manufacturers of these vehicles that we use will bring to market a vehicle that's not a full-size vehicle. Because the reality is that we do need some full-size vehicles, but we need a lot of the mid-size and smaller vehicles as well to just haul around our equipment, an occasional garbage can, not doing any towing. But at this time, there isn't a reliable source for the mid-size to small-size vehicle for our uses.
Thank you, Director. You're my sustainability hero. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mahmood.
Yes, I think for the lake, there's, it's a trial period of the summer. I don't think it's realistic to hire like 7 days a week someone to go there. Like, that's not realistic. And, budget-wise, I've been talking to people and higher up. I don't want to, to what we can do, because the folks on the lake, some of them have legitimate concerns, after this. But we should always think that what happened on the lake is not of our doing. It's a court-ruled things. We have to make sure the people who work on the lake have their day, in court here. Like, we show them that we are not like the letters we abandon. No one abandon anyone, and things are happening for now. Like we say, if there is anything, we have all the enforcement possible to tackle anything that is happening, like everywhere in the city. And we have to tell people that we have to have a positive note, that we're not letting anyone come here and do what they want in Lake Oswego. It will never happen. So the fear has also to calm down. The city has very responsible people, including the city manager that have my meeting today, my monthly meeting. We talk about that and the things that we will do. But also we have to be realistic. We're not gonna pay 2 people 7 days a week over there. Unless we are being hypocritical or something, it's not gonna happen. We have to be realistic on that. So the other thing is parks. You know how I feel about parks, you see. But, we are playing 60 minutes still. I mean, I hope it's gonna be the last season we are playing 60 minutes football. I mean, football is 90 minutes. It's like, I'm thinking why we cannot play there's real turf at the other park, Westlake Park. I know in the fall it's hard, but in the spring, the turf is not that bad. We can play there, and maybe if we did, we could have 90 minutes. I'm just thinking how long we're gonna continue to play, not the regular time. Yeah.
Councilor Mahmood, I'll just
love
say,
to talk to you offline about that.
if we're not going to enforce park rules, then I'm going to let everybody know that they can start playing pickleball at George Rogers Park.
Councilor Raff, I would like to run, I would just like to run this meeting. That's all I'm asking for, is that we listen to one another. So would you like to speak?
Great.
I have a question.
Oh, Karen.
Thank you so much.
Yes, please.
Oh, are you done?
Oh, the question about the 60
The guy
minute.
has been I don't know where he's coming from about this. Respect the president, respect the city that are watching you. You're not the only one in the city.
Okay, Councilor Mahmood, did you have more questions for Director?
I just wanted my question on that. But yeah, we have to tell these folks to come down.
Okay. So, Budget Committee member.
No.
Yes, thank you.
So if I
Do
can
we have a
address.
response, though?
Yes, I do, I do.
Okay,
So,
thank
so as I've stated before, I have talked to the people that are responsible for that. The other thing is that we do have a final draft of our athletic field utilization study. That's part of our Parks Plan 2040 that'll be coming to council in May. I think that will address some of the questions that you have. And I can't make any promises, but we are moving toward the desired result, not only of you, but what we found when we surveyed other participants in the program you're referring to.
Ms. Love.
Thank you. I have a question regarding Receipt Park Phase 2. Currently, it's listed in unfunded $2.3 million. According to some past direct communications with Parks and Rec Phase 2, which includes the playground, picnic shelter, maintenance building, and a bit more parking from the documentation I see on the website. I thought that was considered funded and that a grant was secured by the state of Oregon to match. I'm going to use match lightly. I'm not sure if it was a matching grant or not. So I was wondering if that's changed.
It has not changed, and thank you for pointing out that there's an error. It's a mistake. Yes, it is. It is actually, Phase 2 is funded. It is under construction, and you are correct. We did receive a $1 million grant from State Parks, which was a matching grant that we're matching about 1.62 to finish Phase 2 of that park.
Thank you. That's great news.
Welcome.
Yes. Sorry, budget, yes, please ask your question.
It's a weird last name, it's okay, Salehi. I'm sorry to bring you back to the question about the lake, but I had two. I don't live on the lake, but if I did, I would want to make sure that folks that are using the lake are being safe and that they're not, potentially getting on the lake and having substance or what have you at times of the day that are not necessarily monitored. So some of the questions that some of the people in my network have asked me to ask and advocate for are around surveillance and making sure that, to everybody's point, everybody's being responsible on the lake, regardless of what part of the city they're coming from. So now the two questions I have are, I don't frequent the Millennial Park Plaza, so I don't necessarily know if there is a gate or something that closes after hours. My assumption is that it's not, so that's part of the question and the concern of the residents. And the number two is, if not man it 24/7, is there other ways that maybe we can reasonably man it in a form of a deterrent? Maybe like a light sensor that comes on and there is some kind of a surveillance, something that actually deters folks from entering when they're not supposed to, or think that, okay, you are being recorded some way or another, so maybe you should behave, regardless, again, of what part of the city they're arriving, right? We've heard about stories of teenagers and other things too, and I'm the mom of a new teenager, so I'm terrified of the prospect of free-for-all access. So curious if there's any context that can be added there.
I can add a little bit of context to that, not complete context to that. So as far as surveillance goes, the Lower Millennium Plaza is a well-lit plaza, so it does have lighting throughout it. Headley Pathway that's adjacent to it does have operational lights that are checked routinely, as well as Upper Millennium and Sunderleaf in that area. So as far as the lighting of the plazas, there is light there. We do currently, in the Upper Millennium Plaza and in Sunderleaf Plaza, we do have cameras that are on the plaza. We are right now in the process of working through the technology to actually have a camera in Lower Millennium Plaza that is specifically at the entry point to the lake, so that we will have, I'm not saying that somebody's going to be sitting there 100% of the time, but we will have an ability to see who's there. And we have very successfully worked with strategic placing of cameras throughout our park system with our police department to deter and to identify those times and those trends where people are doing things. And we have worked with them along with our 1.5 park rangers that are currently there, so that we add extra patrols and enforcement when we need to, and then using the police that when we actually identify people that have violated a rule or law, that they are found. I will say that I have to applaud our police department, because we do have a fair bit, more than we used to, of damage, things happening in our park, especially after hours. And they are very adept at finding out who those people are. So we do have an approach. We're looking at implementing that approach, which would be similar to other parks. And we are, as Manager Bennett said, we are looking at a way to fund staffing there for an educational program. And really, I think that what it comes down to is identifying the scope and then identifying what funds we have available, and then having that discussion about how do we close that gap. We have not had the time to completely flesh out what our plan is. Our initial plan that I've discussed with Manager Bennett is doing basically a temporary position, which would be an 8-month, 40-hour a week, which is the maximum we can do in accordance with our collective bargaining agreement. But it would be a temporary position that would be, the primary focus would be Lower Millennium. But what I do want to say too, to kind of clarify things, that does not mean that we're not going to place emphasis, because we know that there are issues there. Our other rangers will be there, and they will be emphasizing their patrol there and their education there. But it's not just, adding one person or two person and expecting it to happen, because we don't work like that. We work with our team, and then we also work with our partners that are the police department, and then utilizing technology so that we can address the issues as they happen, and further the education of the citizens so that they don't put themselves in an unsafe situation.
And yes, please.
Hi, I just wanted to make one observation about Millennium Park and the situation with the lake. Lake Oswego, for better or for worse, we're a brand. We want to attract people here to bring dollars for tourism to our downtown area. The access is right by downtown, so people who come here wanting to go on the lake are most likely going to eat here. They might shop here, that kind of thing. So it might be worth considering some budget to support some staffing just for that reason alone. There could be, we're going to get tax revenues just from that. That's all.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Yeah, Councilor Windman.
Leaving the lake, let's go into the forest. Could you explain the
wonderful
the sort of the job description? Whenever you add a new position, I think it's helpful for everyone to know what your sort of job or your need for an urban forester, and then also the natural resources and stewardship coordinator, which used to be, and then it's kind of left, and then it came back. So it's not a new concept, but I think it would be helpful to have just a positive.
Okay, I'll start with the stewardship coordinator position. So that position is already filled and has been filled for some time. And what that position is the position that coordinates all of our stewardship program, which is all of our friends groups throughout. That position also coordinates our habitat enhancement program, our invasive removal program. The way that that position came about, quite honestly, is I like to tell the story that when you have somebody that works really well and they do a really good job and they're willing to take on more and more and more, they kind of get a backpack and it keeps getting bigger as they move positions. And we had a very fortunate position where we had somebody who started basically doing habitat restoration for us, coordinating that, and then moved up and became our parks manager and then left our organization. When we went to unpack that, we could not resource everything that person was doing. And we couldn't enhance or change our stewardship program. And we started to see a decline in the number of people that were coming forward and our involvement with the community, specifically with our natural habitat. So we looked at taking and creating a position that concentrates on that, and then also putting an emphasis on our relationship with our watershed councils, and not just here, but also with Clean Water Services and west with Clackamas County, to identify resources that we can leverage to the resources that we're putting into the program. So that position is really about servicing that and making sure that we have those connections and that we are being able to leverage resources that we're putting into the work that we're doing here in Lake Oswego on public land. The urban forester position, which is proposed in this budget to be paid partially from parks and partially from public works, streets. Really, that was a position that when myself, the planning director, and our city engineer sat down and looked at our urban forestry plan and looked at how we were going to implement that, which was a goal of our council to implement that. When we looked at the enormity of that and then also the resources that each of our departments had allocated to meet that goal of implementing that, we all looked at each other like we can't implement this effectively. And even though if you look at that plan, it says that is something that comes later in the implementation, we all came together and really worked to see how we could implement it and figured that position, and then that position to better explain what the position actually will do, that position will be basically the steward for our publicly owned forest. So when we're talking about looking at our forests, and it's not just in parks, it's not just in natural areas, it's all of our street trees. It's all of the trees that you see around. Currently, we have people that coordinate work when the work comes up. Emergency responding to emergencies, being reactive to issues that we have with our urban forests, but we're not proactive at all. And if you'll recall, the plan asks us to be more proactive, and it ties into emergent threats on our urban forest. There's a little ugly bug that's coming our way, is in our neighboring towns, that will be devastating to the urban forest in Lake Oswego. And what it does is it creates a resource and a point of contact to take into account the entire urban forest and look at how we can proactively manage it so that we don't have to deal with huge costs when something like an emergent threat comes because we weren't proactive with how we were managing it, and we end up with having to spend millions of dollars to react to it. It's looking at the health of the trees, it's looking at the health of the trees before we have ice storms, all of those things. I'm not saying that those storms won't affect our urban forest, but at this point, we are not resourcing collectively in the city to look at our urban forest to prevent and do the preventative things that we need to do to manage it. And that's what that position is for. It's a resource not only for the city-owned trees in all those areas, But eventually, after we put systems in place of how we're doing that, it will also be a resource that the community can tap into because of the example we're setting on how we're managing our urban forest.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? I had a non-lake related question. Is the connection between Foothills Roar Park and George Rogers, is that in this budget?
Yes, it is.
That is, pardon?
I have a question when you're done.
Oh, I need to look around. Mayor
No, you're
Buff.
fine.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great news.
Yes, it is.
No, I wanted just to a couple comments and then one question. I really appreciate the investment in the urban forestry, and we spend a lot of time on that urban and community forest plan. And sometimes we do the plans, and the plans, sit on the shelf. And I think having this position will really help us advance all the objectives and goals that the community set forth in that plan. And the urban forest is a huge community resource, and we really don't have anyone just dedicated to looking at many people kind of with their hands in parts of it. And I think this position will help kind of tie that all together well. And then I appreciate Director Anderholm's comments in regards to the watching over the parks. And we're fortunate to be a full service city and have a parks department. Many cities don't have a parks department. They have parks, but they're run by parks districts and other things. And so we're so fortunate to have a well funded and really talented team in the parks. And what I've just observed over the years is their keen ability to respond to different conditions. Even somewhat recently, we had these horrific instances of vandalism, in the restrooms that were blowing up the toilets and doing all sorts of weird things. And even to some of the water towers and some of our other properties. I saw the Parks Department respond really well to that and take the steps needed to prevent those things from happening. And in general, Ms. Bennett and her team, I think, have always taken the steps needed to keep the city safe, responded to changing conditions, and I feel like they have a good plan here and a good eye on how to allocate the resources to all of our many parks, which all have hours and all have their own separate issues on a day-to-day basis that we do hear about, and appreciate them working to within the budget to allocate those resources and keep everyone in the community safe and keep the parks healthy and accessible for everyone, because it's a big thing here. I think people feel really welcome in our parks, and it's with a great credit to the Parks Department. And my question is about the LORAC and the golf course. And I was wondering and we'll have to see how this, over time. We all know when we had the Muni golf course before the remodel, we ran that at a little bit of a deficit. And of course, we didn't have the pool. And now we're hopeful that this beautiful golf course that we've created is going to have a lot of use, and the driving range and all those things is taken. But I was wondering do you have a separate kind of budget set aside for just the LORAC and the golf course that you could share with us?
Yeah, so within the budget document, our budget is pretty large and has a number of divisions. We have specific divisions that are the LORAC, and within the LORAC, we also have what we call the aquatics. So there's an aquatics section that we subdivide from that. So we will be tracking both revenue and expenditures on those. So we are still anticipating, and this budget does anticipate, that there will need general fund support overall. We do not believe at this point that our revenues are going to cover all of our expenses. The same goes for the golf course, and I will remind council that the year and a half before we closed the golf course was the first time that we had been close to breaking even on the golf course since 2001. We think that it's going to be popular. We do, based on the community's response that we've been getting. We have over 1,600 members that have signed up to do, pre-tours, which we did yesterday, today, and we'll do tomorrow. Before our ribbon cutting on Saturday. So we feel that it's going to be popular, but we do still feel that there's probably going to need some general fund support. And so the budget that's before you takes that into account. And so there is general fund support for those things. Like anything, after this biennium is up, we will have pretty firm understanding of where we're going to stand. And based on my experience and in the industry norms, the first 2 to 3 years of opening a new recreation center or a new amenity that has a huge revenue component are generally really revenue forward. But we'll be tracking that and we'll be reporting that out to the budget committee during budget meetings and also to the council so that you understand where we are with that. But we're happy with where we are now. We are hitting with our pre-sales, we're hitting our targets, so that we built our plan around. So we're encouraged by that. But that plan also was put together requiring some general fund support.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for spending so much time with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We are on to fire.
Oh, you're going to get it better.
Thank you.
Are there questions? Councilor Afghan.
Hello, Chief. I have one comment and 3 questions.
Okay.
The comment is, we love our fire department. And we appreciate everything you guys do for us. Question number 1, you have 53 people, FTEs, in the next couple years. Is that enough?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was hoping for a little more explanation.
I believe it's enough. We've got enough to run the crews on the road 24 hours a day. We've got enough overhead staff to manage them, and I think we're in good stead.
All right, thank you. A couple years ago, you were budgeted for almost $1.9 million, and part of that was for future fire engine and other equipment. Can you tell us where we are with ordering big equipment, and are they delivered or will be delivered? And do we have anything in the 2025 to 2027 for big equipment?
So you have a fire engine that's coming in to replace the engine that's at the downtown station. It's not in build yet. Once they move it into a build process, we ordered it a year and a quarter ago. It takes almost 3 years to get in line and get the engine built. So it should show up in November of 2026.
I also noticed that there's a brush rig included in your capital request. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, we have a brush rig now. It was cobbled together by taking a pickup truck about 20 years ago and putting what they call a skid on the back of it that has a pump and has some hose that allows you to go out and take it out, 4-wheel drive, and fight wildland fires. That rig has been costing us, each time we'd go on a deployment, we're gone with that rig about a month and a half a year to 2 months a year. It's gone, it's out in wildland, whether it's in Eastern Oregon or Southern Oregon or locally, it's out. And so we put $350,000 in the budget to replace it. It was costing us about $12,000 a year in maintenance, and it's, again, 20-plus years old. So it should be delivered in October, November this year.
Thank you, Chief. We love our fire department. Thank you, Chief.
Councilor Raff.
Question about the truck. Actually brought up an interesting question I had. So if it takes 3 years to deliver a truck, do we pay 100% on delivery? Is there a deposit? How does that work?
We contracted, and if I remember right, this one was
$1.149 million. And council approved that about a year and a half ago. That's our price, and we'll pay for it on delivery.
So full amount when it's delivered?
When it's delivered.
Okay, so this was leading to a depreciation question. So it's then, if we pay full amount when it's delivered, my question was, if we paid ahead of time, then are we depreciating it while that money is working for us?
No, we'll only depreciate it when it gets here. We did have the option of actually paying for with a slight discount, but we're actually making more money in income than they were going to give us as a discount, so.
Any other questions? Council, oh, I need to look both ways. Ms. Love, please.
Thank you, Chief. I had some questions regarding the South Shore Task Force initiatives. I sat on that committee, and I was just following up on a couple of questions. So I know right now that your department is going out for an RFP. That's what you refer to it as, for the beginning stages of exploratory cost. So when the bond, if moving forward in that direction in the next year, you'll have solidified at least the cost of that bond. I was just wondering, is that initial amount for the work of the RFP coming out of your current budget?
It will come out of the current budget, out of our contingency, yes.
Okay, great. And then have you made progress on that?
Yes, we're making progress each and every day. We're working with our partners in planning and in public works to help guide the process, and we're just about ready to move forward with the RFP on that, yes.
Awesome. So nothing out of this budget that we're looking at will be tied into that initiative with the RFP? With the first phase?
No, there's funding in the budget to do the professional services. So even though he's got funding in the current budget, this is a classic where, unlike a capital assets, he's going to have to pay for the fire department's going to have to pay for this over time. So yeah, there's funding allocated to start the work in the current fiscal year, but there's also funding allocated in the 25-27 budget to finish the work because he can't spend last year's money next year.
Right. So thank you.
Councilor Mahbub?
Chief, thank you for your work and your service. I was asking about the boat and the rescue team. How do you intervene on the lake?
They go on the lake less frequently than they go on other waterways. The lake has not presented problems, rescue problems over time that I've noticed. But they get deployed about 55 times a year, and it's typically on the Willamette. It's on the Clackamas Rivers is where we find the most helpful.
Okay, thank you, yeah.
Any not, and looking around more carefully, seeing other questions, thank you, and thank you for all you do. And next up is the library. Welcome.
For those of you that don't know me, I'm Melissa Kelly, the library director. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councilor Afghan, you may start.
Hello, Director.
Do you love the library?
Well, I love every single department we have in our beautiful city. The reason I step out and say we love our fire department and we love our police department is because they put their life in danger to protect us. Otherwise, we love our libraries, we love our planning department, we love our engineering, we love our facility maintenance, and that should be all of us saying that. But Director, I noticed that the contingency in your budget stays pretty much the same as previous year. And last budget review, I asked this question, that why do you have such a big contingency? And I believe your answer was because of the improvement that we would need to do with the building and we don't arbitrarily go in and do them on a systematic. If they break down, we fix them because we may want to do something different with the library. Is that still the case? So we're having a placeholder just in case, or is this contingency for something different?
It is largely available for projects in the facility, as you mentioned. There are some other initiatives, one-time initiatives that we sometimes do use the contingency for that might be above and beyond our operating revenue to pay for. For example, our bookmobile that is on order, some of the contingency funds have been allocated for that one-time purchase. Also in this biennium budget, we've budgeted for library hold lockers or book vending machines. Again, that would be a one-time equipment type purchase that we would be able to use the contingency to be able to provide for the community that is above and beyond what we would be able to cover with our operating revenue.
Thank you.
Councilor Mahboub?
Yes, Melissa, I love the library.
Thank you.
Because, so yeah, my question is, in the policy that's coming from Washington, are there any, impact on the library, whether legally or, in terms of resources?
Thank you for that question, Counselor. We do not receive direct federal funds for our library, but we do have a number of resources and services that are provided through the State Library of Oregon that are funded with federal funds. So we're definitely watching that situation closely. I think there's more questions than answers at present, but for example, our Gale database package, that is a statewide set of databases that our residents have access to, those are paid for by federal funds and could potentially be at risk, as well as our ebook platform. There's a big chunk of funding, federal funding, that supports that platform. You might recognize the name Libby, that we are able to access our ebooks through that platform. So we're definitely watching that situation closely. There may be some impacts if that funding is cut at the federal level. And there's many other services that are provided through federal funding through the state library, but those are two of the main ones that our citizens receive services from that we're looking after closely at this point.
And you think also the bookmobile will serve more underserved, like, some old elderly people?
Yes.
When we get, yeah.
Yes, we do currently have our Rover pop-up mobile library services that go out into the community, and we do visit senior living facilities. We visit Mercy Greenbrae, Hunger Fighters, and a number of other areas of neighborhoods and schools and events in the city to reach folks and take the library out into those communities. And I think that's also a sustainability initiative as well, in order to reduce the number of trips that folks are having to make to the library to be able to bring materials out to them.
Thank you, Ms. Aya.
Thank you.
Did you have it? Yes, Ms. Rai, please.
Does the library plan to fund bookmobile staff, or staff's the wrong word, but does it plan to request grants from the state for that?
We do not have plans at this point to request grants, but we do have available funding in our budget. We've reallocated FTE that's already been allocated to the library in order to increase the staffing to the point that we will need to be able to add service hours with the bookmobile. So that's something that we're able to cover with the FTE allocation that we already have.
There may be grants available.
Oh, wonderful.
I love the library. I'm there probably at least twice a week. And I also realize, though no longer having young children, just how challenged it is for the number of groups. Are there any initiatives kind of pending much larger decisions? Is there anything in the budget that's helping just for the number of and I think particularly for kids and the summer programs, is there anything new in the budget to try and alleviate the congestion, for lack of a better word?
With regard to the facility, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah,
It is
facility groups, initiatives, yeah.
It is definitely a city council goal to develop a strategy for a community center library that would allow us to expand the footprint of the library, because we do have very high congestion, and our programs are very highly attended. So we are definitely looking forward to continuing to work with council and community to see what we can do there. We do work with our other city department partners as well. We hold a lot of events at the ACC, sometimes here at City Hall, work with the school district to use their facilities to the extent possible until we can make progress on that goal for a larger facility.
Yeah, it's just going to take time. Yep, definitely. Seeing no other questions, thank you so much. I wish you were here to read us a story.
Oh, thank you.
Planning.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Jessica Numanalou. I'm the Community Development Director.
Councilor Mahboub?
I love our planning. So, Jessica, I love planning, honestly. Yeah, she knows I work a lot with them. But do we have enough staff? Because honestly, most of our constituents, they call, they write, they tell us that, they have things and it takes time. And I think it's maybe because of the FTE. And if the city can do anything about that, because it's frustrating for someone building their house and waiting a month, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 8 weeks for a permit and stuff. Is it because of staffing? And if it's the case, what do you think we can do?
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. So first of all, I would note that a community development department is both planning and building. The building budget is in a separate area that's not funded out of the general fund. We added actually an FTE in building during the previous budget cycle, and that person was hired in about September. And we specifically were looking for someone who is at a more senior level, because it's very difficult to hire plans examiners. So we were looking for someone who's more experienced. And in doing so, we have seen our turnaround times be reduced in our building department. It also is helpful because this person is a more experienced plans examiner, so they can do like commercial projects. Multifamily is also actually classified as commercial in our building code. So not having to farm that out to a third party, which is what we've been doing, because our other plans examiners don't have the certifications to do that type of thing. And also, it provides us some backup for our current building official, for someone to be able to fill in should he be out, or God forbid, he should, quit and get a job somewhere else, because it's very difficult to hire building officials and plans examiners. From the planning side of things, our code is really complicated. When we look at for instance, a single-family dwelling, we have an 8-page checklist we have to review. So I have one staff person whose whole job is just to review building permits for compliance with planning or zoning codes. So part of it is the complexity. I think we're addressing it on the building side. Our staff, as part of our work program, are also looking at process improvements as well. So we have the community development code audit that's coming up, and that is one of the it's a council goal, and that's one of the items that we'll be looking at, removing barriers to housing. Maybe we can get that checklist, 8-page checklist, down a little bit. That would be great. It's never going to be, lot coverage, height, and setbacks like it used to be when I first started working here, but if we can kind of simplify it and make it less complex, I think that will help with the review times as well.
Councilor Councilor Wendland. I was going to go to, not seeing a hand.
I have one comment and 3 questions. Just kidding, no. I just want to emphasize 2 things. One, both on the planning side, just for the Budget Committee's reference, there's been a tremendous amount of work that has been added onto our planning department by the state of Oregon, to the point of it's taking up an inordinate amount of time of council as well. And we just see the tip of the iceberg. Jessica's world sees everything below the water, and it's huge. And I just wanted to compliment you in the fact that you've maintained your same FTEs in your planning department with all this additional work. And I know we sometimes get consultants and so on, but for the most part, I think it's true to note that we're going to continue to have additional fun stuff from the state. And so this department is working, I won't say overtime all the time, but pretty much it's a highly stressed department from a resource standpoint of view. And then the other comment I wanted to make is I've been listening to builders and developers for, I don't know, a long time since I've been on council, probably 8 years or 7 years almost now. And I will say that recent conversations, I've heard nothing but positive things about Lake Oswego in comparison to other jurisdictions. We are complicated, we're very specific, we're a little bit anal, but once builders get the process down, they're very happy and they're very complimentary of our staff for being a high customer service area. We do have an opportunity to do a review at the code this year, next year, to maybe simplify it a little bit if we can, so that things can go throughout on a more efficient basis. But if you look at the planning notes, which are the most of any department, you'll see the complexity of what's happening in this area. And I just wanted to recognize that fact. And Jessica and her team are doing a fabulous job on keeping us organized and keeping us moving forward. And it's a choice that we made as a city to do what we could to help maintain Lake Oswego community as best we can with some local input versus just taking the state mandate and just carte blanche having them tell us everything to do. It'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of this legislative session, to see if they've basically taken away all of our tools to run a community that we want. And now is the time to put your input to your senator and your congressman to say, or the representative to say, back off state, let us be ourselves. But anyway, I know that's not exactly budgetary, but I did want to point those things out. And it's one of those departments that you just want to run smoothly, and Salem should just stay out of our hair. But anyway, that's just political comment.
Yes, Ms. Chai.
It is really great to hear different group coming together, talk about each as an individual. But I do, with the technology advancement that we see around everywhere, like even for my company, we are launching a new ERP tool. When we launch a new ERP tool, it impacts every group. And the efficiency coming from every group is huge because you literally got every individual process got connected. We, as a city, going forward, when we embracing the technology development, do we have a technology roadmap office or whatever, that we actually can look at how we're going to run a city going forward, utilizing all the technology. Like the police department was talking, the park was talking about the running analysis. Police department was talking about they need something to put on a cloud, but library, right? I think going forward, we really as a city needs to embrace what are we going to see, and because the technology, like the AI, the tool, the connected stuff that I think as a city, we definitely has a lot of things we can take advantage of and to make us smarter, more automated. That's my personal view going forward, holistically among everyone, every sub-program. want to make that suggestion because I see the significant changes in my company that when we launch a ERP tool, that every group actually got super connected. We significantly reduced our resource needed. And then the next generation of people working in each department will be embracing it, and then that's the future will be.
Yes, Ms. Salehi.
Thank you. My question for you, Director, is going to be a tricky one because as a city, we love our trees too. So your comment earlier on potentially looking at the permit process and maybe simplifying it, it does bring up a question for me around the tree removal permits and the potential of looking at perhaps some of the parameters that people are currently being, subjected to. I refer to the recent events of, from February 21 to now, we've had more extreme winters, more extreme storms. Last year was terrible. I think there was 100 tree down in Lake Oswego alone during 1 month. And many of them landed right in the middle of somebody's home. And that coupled with a lot of the issues with staffing and obviously building and all the things that are gonna have been experiencing, but also probably in the future too. I'm curious if there is plan maybe to look at some of those parameters to say, hey, yes, this tree is native to the city and the state, but it's literally 5 inches from your house, and if it falls, it's dramatic. So we allow that perhaps or not. Are some of those conversations are also being had around tree removal? I will say one more thing before I hear your thoughts. In City of Portland, there's been instances of residents coming back and suing the city because they had applied multiple times to remove certain trees. They didn't get allowed, and then that fell right on top of their home, injuring their family, what have you. So curious if we're kind of thinking about some of those things to ease up on maybe some instances that could be really terrible outcome for their homeowners.
Yes, the answer is yes. Well, first of all, I would say under our current code, we do have provisions for hazard and emergency tree removal. We sometimes hear people who will come in and say, well, the city wouldn't have let me remove the tree, or they denied our tree permit. And what often happens is they'll come in and we'll tell them what they need to do. They have to usually get a hazard, tree risk assessment hazard from what's called a track certified arborist, tree risk assessment certified arborist, excuse me. And a lot of times they don't want to do that. And so they'll come in, we'll tell them what they have to do, and then they come away and they're frustrated and they say the city wouldn't let us remove a tree. So that actually happens more often than people realize. But having said that, it is something we need to look at. There are instances where there's trees that people don't have a high risk tolerance level for, that are not, they don't rise to the level of being a hazard or emergency. And in our budget, we are budgeting for a tree code update. We're actually have an RFP out right now, so we're about ready to select a consultant, which should be on board in early May. And one of the items that we are going to be look at is our hazard tree and emergency tree removal process, and what we should be considering given the stronger instances of storms, heat domes, other things that are damaging our trees and potentially affecting their hazard, potentially becoming future hazards. So yes, that is something we're going to be looking at. I don't know what the answer is going to be yet, but that is a project that we're going to be working on that is in the proposed budget for this coming year. Yeah.
Other questions or comments? Thank you so very much. Do we have any other directors or?
We have other directors if you'd like to speak with them. For example, we have the finance department here. IT is here if that question that came up during the last conversation is one you want to go in. And then of course, Erica is no doubt sitting back there. Erica is the main attraction at your May 8th meeting. So if you want to hold your questions about what happens when you open the door without your badge. Oh, that happens. If you want to hold your questions about the utility funds or engineering until the May 8th meeting, that might be better. So, Megan's here if you have any questions about HR.
Are there any questions?
Questions about city council budget, we can take. CMO, we can take.
Are there any other questions for any, and I'm looking through my notes, for any other departments? Counselor
Yes,
Afghan.
for Director Rooney.
Okay. Director Rooney, invite.
Is that next time, or is that?
Next time.
Next time?
Next.
I thought we were,
If you want to talk about, if you want to ask her operational questions tonight, you certainly can. But we also could hold that, it's up to you as a committee. What do you want?
I thought we were going to talk about CIP next time. Is
Yes.
that
Yes.
including the entire engineering?
It's really up to the chair. We can handle the
So
operation.
if there are operational questions, we
Yes.
can
Come
certainly
on up there,
take them
okay.
now, and then we will take the CIP questions next time.
Yeah, these are simple questions about contingencies.
Great. There are no such things as simple questions about contingencies, but go ahead.
Chair Zeller, should I start?
How long are your questions? Because am I sensing a need for a break, to take a short recess and then come back and be focused? Yes, okay, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and then we will be back at
8:15.
8:15.
Sharp.
8:15 sharp.
Oh.
Okay, we're back in session. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take questions on contingencies for the utilities, but we're going to save all operational questions to go with the capital budget. So Councilor Afghan, you had a few questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Director, on the sewer contingency, I noticed that relative to the previous budget, it's about 2.5 times more. It has gone up from 10 to 24 million. Can you shed some light on that?
Go ahead. So basically, Councilor Afghan, that was, we went for bonds to purchase the land down, and so we had money in the fund, in this budget, to purchase the land. We went and sold bonds to purchase the land for the new sewer plant and replenish the money that was there for the other projects in the out years. So that's where the $14 million comes from.
Thank you. Same question for water. The department contingency has gone up from 1.5 million to 8.6 million.
Right. So again, this comes from the fact that our reserves are for capital outlay are increasing. And so the contingency is there. It's just we haven't spent the project, we haven't done the projects as quickly as we had originally planned to.
So we haven't spent the funding and we're carrying it forward?
Yes.
And are we planning to do those capital projects?
Yeah, we have no end of projects that we need to do. It's really a staff resourcing issue for us. And so
Okay.
we will get to them, yes.
Understood. Thank you so much. Same question for street. Department contingency has gone up from 5.3 to 9 million.
Yeah, they're the same kind of thing. It's the rollover from the capital.
And stormwater.
$3.8 to $6.8 on page 14, yes, same thing. So it doesn't take, just as a reminder, all it takes is one or two projects to change our, especially with something like stormwater, which is a little bit more lean fund, is all it takes is a good thing to come along like, I don't know, a FEMA disaster, and it costs us a couple million bucks, $2 million, excuse me, to respond to that. And so having these contingencies be of, what appears to be substantial compared to the other departments in particular is helpful for situations like we had in February of 2024, where that was about a $2 million effort. We will hopefully get reimbursed for those sort of things, but that's the kind of example of where those funds come in handy. And it's nice to have those in reserve for emergency situations.
Thank you. I know that you have at least one open position. Do you need additional resources to get these projects done?
Councilor Afghan, let's just keep those questions and then talk about the entirety of the operational and capital budget, because I'm assuming that FTE will go along with what projects you're able to accomplish. Is that okay?
Of course. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director Rooney.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Councilor Wendland.
Just one, it's kind of a tie-in with the city manager's list of the 25-27 budget. On the $3 million that we go from the general fund to the street fund, is there a reason why we don't index that for inflation? Because we do that on almost everything else in the budget.
That'd be great.
I mean, mostly we transfer on average 3, and you have as a council and budget committee in the past, it used to be 2 million and you moved it to 3 million. But I would recommend against a flat out index because you have the rest of the general fund to deal with. And so I agree with your earlier comment that you have options for balancing the general fund, but I wouldn't want you to guarantee that a capital fund got first dibs essentially on your most flexible resources. You have other options. Where I'm headed is, and again, you may periodically want to increase it, and in 2028, when the East End Redevelopment District rolls off and those revenues return to the general fund, that might be a really opportune time to have a conversation about general fund operations versus street capital. But your general fund money is your most flexible money, and their street fund is otherwise inflexible, and you have other revenue sources in your street fund. And so if you got to the place where you wanted to increase funding for streets, I'd recommend we have a sort of a global conversation about all of your options before I said, let's automatically guarantee a higher amount of your most useful dollar. I'm not suggesting you wouldn't want to allocate it. I'm just saying I don't think you'd want to, as a matter of policy, allocate it. We allocate everything we can to the street fund based on previous council direction without impacting general fund program, because we assume everything we're doing, and we just talked about police and fire and library and parks, everything we're doing with those more flexible dollars is stuff that you as a council want to continue to do.
Right, but I guess it's as a budgetary principle or I don't know what
no, I see where you're going.
I would say, because we're just diluting, we've had, yes, the 3 million and so on. I would say, I would counter that to say that a budget needs to reflect inflation. And because we've done this for many years, I agree with your flexibility part.
Right.
I think anytime the council can take a flexibility and move anything around within the budget, they might say that different priorities and so on. But what I'm saying is that the 3 million that we used to, or 2 million that we used to give, went a lot further in 2019 than it is in 2025 and certainly in 2026. And so all I'm saying is that we do that pretty much with every other.
Yeah, no, I buy that argument, but I also will say to you, that all of you, that I mean, on Saturday morning, or Sunday really, we're going to open an entirely new program that is, so if in isolation, if everything stayed the same always in terms of city priorities about general fund spending, you could absolutely do that. You could say, apply the same percentage increase to the street fund allocation as you do to everything else. But unfortunately, that's not the only movement that's happening in the general fund. So we do, as a matter of principle, apply the same percentage to departments, but we also take into account council goals, new program, a whole bunch of other things that put more stress on the general fund. And the only place we have to go for those things is the general fund resource. So I'm not telling you, I mean, as a council or budget committee, if you want to give me that direction that in future years you want us to apply the same allocation to the street fund allocation, because I agree with you that the cost of road projects is only going up, and Erica would be the first to tell me that. I feel like the allocation to the street fund is a bit of a luxury that most jurisdictions can't afford, and I'm glad we have the opportunity to do it because maintaining our infrastructure is so critical to our ability to provide basic services. But it would be a really big change in philosophy to treat that as sort of the same as police and fire or the same as parks and library. And if that's where you and I would say I'd go to the council for that, with all due respect to the budget committee. If that's where you as a council want to go, we can certainly go there. But it is something that gives us, I mean, it's essentially an added contingency. And I think many of you know that, and Erica said this, and she's probably more polite than I am, that the infrastructure need in our community is infinite, right? We've heard some very impassioned conversations about Blue Heron Road tonight, and I agree with the condition of that road, but it's not the only road in town where we have the same situation. And I think that's the challenge that we as your staff have of how do we make sure we're looking after the basic services that enable us all to live in proximity to one another and trying to reinvest in the capital assets of the community. And that's really a policy choice. I guess if you all as a council want to make that policy choice that I should apply the same percentage to the street fund allocation, we can do that. But we need to recognize that has implications for what we can afford for police, fire, parks, library. And so that's why I would personally, as somebody who balances a budget, not recommend that you do that and allow us to talk about it every budget cycle so that you guys can you could make a decision tonight. You want to reduce the amount we allocate to general fund departments to increase the street fund allocation. That's your prerogative. So I guess I would say don't create a policy, but rather have that conversation every other year about what the city's spending priorities are for the upcoming biennium. I don't know if I'm making sense. Because the truth is the infrastructure need is extensive, as you all know, because you guys see all of the plans. You know we have $200 million worth of needed curb cuts. So.
Oh, I understand that, but I have gotten more phone calls from people in the last week to tell me they were so happy that we did the paving project over on
Glenmorey or the one on Middlecrest. Yeah, I really like the one on Middlecrest.
And then when we did First Edition, I swear to God, I probably got more phone calls from people in conversations to say that was their happiest day of their life when their street. And I would say that streets are, I understand it's a capital project. I think it's also a maintenance project, just as we have park maintenance, we have everything else in there. It's not necessarily, in my opinion, just a capital project. It's something that I feel, from my feedback from residents, that they want high level of maintenance to our streets. And I could make the argument that, you've added, 8 new staff members. And had we done the indexing, maybe we could have only have added 6. Now, that's every line item in the budget, and I understand what you're saying, it's the flexibility and it's different than what you're used to. Lake Oswego is different than what most people are used to, especially with the resources we have and the taxes people pay. So I'm just saying they want a high level of service for things, including streets. So that's all.
Did you want to respond?
No, I mean, that's really a policy statement he's made. So.
Yeah, which I think is beyond the purview of the budget committee, so.
I don't know if it's beyond the purview of the budget committee, but I guess what Councilor Wendland just articulated is that's what the budget process is all about, right? We have a limited pool of resources. If our aspirations didn't exceed our resources, it'd be a sad day, right? Like that's the essential element. And so what this process is about balancing our desires for certain kinds of activities, programs, outcomes against the resources that we have to deliver them. And so as we propose the budget, I wouldn't recommend to you that you take any more of your general fund resources and allocate them to streets, but it is the budget committee's prerogative to disagree with my proposal.
And I'm hearing 2 separate things, is one, how general fund dollars are allocated in the future and cycles versus this specific budget.
Correct.
And which is taking money away. I think the first is a policy decision.
Yes.
The second is a budget decision, which I don't necessarily hear Councilor Wendland saying, of course, we all want more money for the streets, but I don't hear you arguing to take money back.
I'm just saying that being consistent in your budgeting process, I would say that it would be fair to the budget to have a cost of living increase because we've had it in the budget. It's not like it's been a one-time deal. We've had this since Jeff Goodman has been on. And Jeff Goodman did not call me, by the way. I did not have any conversations with Jeff. He just lives in the spirit of this council. I'm just saying that with inflation that's happened, the 2019 dollars that we had are probably, maybe 2/3 of what we could spend on now. And I think it's just, it's something that it's helped our paving program, and it's helped us from not going back to taxpayers and raising the fees for paving. So anyway, but you're right. I'm just advocating for consistency and cost of living, but that's it.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, with that, in terms of next steps, the budget will come out a week before the May 8th meeting.
You have the budget.
Sorry, not the budget. Will there be updated information?
So, Sean, do you want to cover how we'll handle questions? Because
Yeah.
you have what you have, including the CIP. So everything,
Okay, we're not getting anything
no,
updated.
other
Okay,
than
thank you.
response to questions.
Yes.
So then, is the desire, when would you like questions in order to be able to respond?
As soon as you have them. I mean,
Okay.
no, I mean, we want them by no later than the Monday before the meeting.
Monday
Probably like
before the
Monday
meeting?
morning before the meeting. That gives staff 2.5
Okay.
days.
And I misspoke. I thought there was an update that would come, but
We may
so-
fix that CIP error that we have around Rasik Park, but
Okay.
we can send out a supplemental
If you
page
just
for
send
that.
the questions to Melissa and Madison,
So
and so we can
questions
compile
to-
them.
Yep.
And then we'll have staff answer them, and then hopefully Wednesday night, Thursday morning before the meeting, we'll send it out to the 14 committee members.
Great. So
We'll send
that's-
all of the questions and all of the
The
answers
answers.
to all of you.
So as you have your questions, go ahead and send them in. Don't delay, is what I'm hearing. And with that, we will now recess the Lake Oswego Budget Committee to call to order the LORA Budget Committee. And just a reminder, our next Budget Committee meeting will be Thursday, May 8th at 6 p.m. So this Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025 meeting of the Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency Budget Committee is now called to order. Ms. Henderson, will you please call the roll?
Buck,
Here.
Afghan,
Here.
Mamboop,
Here.
Corrigan. Here. Rapp,
Here.
Verdick,
Here.
Wendland,
Here.
Zeller,
Here.
Rebello,
Here.
Salehi, Hay, Rye, Love,
Here.
Islander.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. As we're beginning this budget process, we also need to select both the LORA Budget Committee Chair and Vice Chair. Is there a motion to nominate for Chair?
I move that I move to nominate Elizabeth Zeller as chair.
Second.
So thank you, Mayor Buck and Councilor Maboop. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to nominate for Vice Chair?
I move to nominate Jamie Rye as vice chair.
I will second that. So thank you, Mayor Buck, for the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any public comment on the LORA? No, seeing none, I will turn it over to Ms. Bennett.
The budget for LORA this upcoming biennium is very, very simple. What you have in both redevelopment projects is debt service, basically. The East End budget is slightly more complicated because we're really, really hoping that we will sell the North Anchor property, and so we'll have the opportunity to receive those revenues and repay the general fund for its loan to LORA for a City Hall project. And you'll see some minor expenses around North Anchor. I really don't have anything exciting to tell you about this budget.
Any questions? Comments? All right. I would entertain a motion that, to move that the Lake Oswego Redevelopment Agency Budget Committee approve the budget for the 25-27 biennium in the amount of $60,360,115 as proposed.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Maboop. Is there, I moved, Councilor Maboop seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And with that, the meeting of the LORA Budget Committee is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for a long evening. Really appreciate it.
Oh,
This is not long.
Very good.
Great job. Good meeting.
Thanks.
He's enjoying it so much. Bring me the binder again. You know, Sean walked up.